This video is brought to you by Verve. Head on over to verve.co/Gaijin to get a 30-day free trial of ad-free viewing for not just today's video topic, but countless anime, cartoons, and independent series. Hey everyone, Gaijin Goombah here, and welcome back to Culture Shock. We break down your favorite games and anime and discover the culture that inspired them, and oh my gosh, we haven't done this in months.
7 months to be exact. I mean, I'm not really sure we can count the pants-ripping Matsuri Festival video. What's the occasion?
Well, we have been going at it really hard with our new show Yokai Hunters as of late, but I think it's time that we go back to basics and just talk about some simple cultural inspirations and an anime that's been really exploding in popularity as of late.
Well, what'd you have in mind?
It's this absolutely crazy anime where a percentile of human population have just spontaneously combusted into these living fire creatures.
Oh, you mean Fire Force?
No, see, they're these advanced specialized fighting forces run by some weird hybrid of the government and military that fight these bizarre living fire people using advanced combat tactics.
So, you mean Fire Force?
No, see, it's like, despite being set in the future, it actually has a ton of references to its historical firefighting past by including elements of hardcore Edo period firefighters called Hikeshi.
You sure you're not talking about Fire Force?
No, I'm talking about Promare. You know, that Studio Trigger anime movie that got an international release and is doing surprisingly well? What are you talking about?
The David production anime called Enen no Shobotai, or Fire Force as it's called stateside, which has been getting a lot of international attention over the last season. Huh, that's so weird. What's up with the influx of firefighting anime?
Well, I know there are a few theories floating around about this particular coincidence, but honestly, I'm surprised there haven't been more manga and anime on the topic of firefighting. Because while Japan's history of earthquakes, tsunamis, and typhoons are forever etched into our minds, people seem to forget how utterly devastating the fires of Japan were, and far too often have forgotten the stories of the heroic individuals that protected the everyday people from desolation while their government did little to help. I honestly think it's about time we get some modern series paying homage to these heroes.
I'm down for that, but that begs the question, what made fires in Japan more devastating than anywhere else?
Well, if I had one word to describe Japan, it would be cramped. I remember when I was first living overseas in an exchange program, I actually got dizzy as my brain was trying to process how many shops and buildings and homes there were in such a small space. But that comes as no surprise. Almost 80% of Japan's topography is mountainous, and it took some extreme mountain cutting and landscaping for Japan to build what it now has in the first place. Tie that in with the fact that all buildings in Japan's early years leading right up to its industrialization period were made of wood, and I think it's pretty easy to see how a single fire could absolutely decimate a city or town. And decimate it did. During the Edo period of 1601 to 1868, the capital alone suffered from 49 devastating fires. And when I say devastating, I don't mean a dozen houses and businesses burned down. I mean tens of thousands of houses and buildings were destroyed, and several thousands of people perished. For example, according to a limited research I have, the Great Fire of Meideki in 1657 alone took 107,000 lives, and the Great Fire of Bunsei in 1829 claimed more than 370,000 buildings. Fires so great that they were actually given an ironic name by the people who suffered from them. Edo no Hana, or Flowers of Edo, a reference seen blatantly in Fire Force. So with as much of a threat as even the tiniest of fires posed, you think the shogunate would dump every resource it could into creating a fast-reacting, hyper-efficient firefighting force, right? Well, Edo had these guys, the Hikeshi. And it's these gangs of rowdy commoners that provide the backbone to characters like Gato and the Burning Rescue of Promare, and Shinmon Benimaru and the Special Fire Force Company 7 in Fire Force. Now, let me give you all a little context. In the beginning, there were 3 classes of Hikeshi that were responsible for 3 specific residential areas should a fire break out. There was the Daimyo Hikeshi, who were responsible for protecting political and religious buildings, the Jobi Keshi, who were responsible for protecting samurai residences from fire, and then finally, the Machi Bikeshi, who were responsible for protecting the chonin or common folk dwellings. However, unlike the Daimyo Hikeshi and Jobi Keshi, who were hardened, trained veteran firefighters with the best equipment and greatest experience, the Iroha Yonju Hachigumi, or 48 alphabetical groups that made up the Machibi Keshi, were made up of little more than the residents of the district that they were assigned to protect, with very little assistance coming from the government. In fact, it was said that the Daimyo Hikeshi and the Jobi Keshi wouldn't even bat an eye if they saw the Chonin lower class domiciles erupt in flame. So if you're a fan of Promare or Fire Force, you're probably starting to see some parallels, right? Well, let's first look at Promare. We have our burning rescue force comprised of our protagonists, Gallo, Ingus, Varys, Luca, Aina, and Remy. Though receiving some funding from the local government, it's obvious that this ragtag group is self-reliant when it comes to doing their job of fighting this anime's personification of fire, the Burnish, with each quirky member bringing their own individual skill to make the team whole. Sounds a bit like the underfunded, gung-ho, commoner-built Machibikeshi, right? Well, then we have the Freeze Force, a fully government-sponsored organization of highly trained firefighting soldiers sporting the most advanced technology of tools, armor, and vehicles, caring little for the plight of the everyman and instead following orders with seemingly brutal zeal. And that sounds familiar, right? A highly trained and government-sponsored firefighting force that only cares about the upper class? That sounds a lot like the Jobikeshi and Daimyo Hikeshi, right? But honestly, I think Fire Force actually nails this parallel down even stronger. The 7th Fire Force Company under Benimaru answers to no one but the neighborhood of Asakusa that they watch over, swearing no loyalty to the Tokyo Empire or Church of Holy Soul. Heck, they don't even have official meetings. When a fire shows up, they just move out. This in turn parallels the Machibikeshi's independence from the central government in Edo. They were dependent on and responsible for the local commoners, and just like the 7th Company, had massive rivalries with other firefighting groups. In fact, these rivalries were so fierce that it actually turned into a turf war between the lower class Hikeshi. I mean, as one might expect from an organization loosely put together from commoners with little assistance and organization from the government, Hikeshi, while being very skilled at their job of putting out fires, quickly broke down into little more than independent gangs. Much like the Yakuza of the Edo period, Hikeshi organizations were founded on principles of generalized rowdiness as well as a brotherly bond to the group. In fact, just like Yakuza, Hikeshi members would oftentimes full-body tattoo themselves with horimono in a show of masculinity and solidarity. But with that feeling of brotherly group mentality came conflict. And buddy, if you thought the Yakuza was apprehensive when it came to turf war, it doesn't hold a candle to how rough the Hikeshi could get. A Hikeshi group that tried to put out a fire outside their turf would usually cause an escalation ending in an all-out fistfight between the home team and the visitor, so to speak. Reason being is because the general public dang near worship the Hikeshi Firefighters as local heroes. Where the government turned a blind eye to the plight of the Chonin, these hardcore manly heroes of the people stepped up and saved them from roaring flames. Thus, by saving a neighborhood from a fire, that Hikeshi group would develop street cred, and the more cred you had, the further your influence spread. In fact, it actually got to a point where two rival Hikeshi groups would actively beat the crap out of each other to get to a fire first. So you can probably then understand why there's so much animosity between firefighting groups in Promare and Fire Force. In Promare, the Burning Rescue and Freeze Force are constantly at odds with each other. Where the Burning Rescue Company would rush in and save the day using their firefighting mechs, the government-sponsored Freeze Force would sweep in at the end and take credit for the halt of the Burnish. An action that really gets on Gallo's nerves specifically, as his passions to be a hero to the people is what drives him. Similarly, do we see the obvious animosity between Fire Force companies. When the main protagonists of the 6th Company are dispatched with an evangelist investigation in Asakusa, there is immediate animosity from the 7th Company who watches over it, claiming they didn't want another company messing with their turf, while sprinkling in some smack talk against the government. As we later then see that the locals have the utmost reverence for their Waka and would gladly be put down by him if they were to turn into an inferno. Similar to the absolute reverence that the local people of Edo had for the Hikeshi, and the Hikeshi's distaste for the centralized government. Honestly, I could go on and on about the politics and street fights that made the Hikeshi legendary. I mean, I didn't even get to the incident in 1805 where a group of Hikeshi got into a skirmish with some sumo wrestlers at Shinmei Shrine, but I've been yammering on for over 8 minutes without even bringing up the most blatant callbacks to Edo Hikeshi that Fire Force and Promare have, the Hikeshi's equipment. Now, I know that both Fire Force and Promare make it very apparent that they're referencing old-school Hikeshi gear. I mean, Gallo of Promare himself goes on an entire narrative-shattering spiel about how he's carrying the torch of Japan's greatest firefighters of old. But there's also a lot that we're shown that's never properly explained, so let's start with the one that you've probably already heard about, the Hikeshi Matoi. The Matoi was a massive 3-dimensional banner that was used not only as a physical representation of the Hikeshi group, but also used as an identification marker. When a fire was spotted, the bearer of the Matoi would sprint to the burning building, actually climb on top of it, and then swing the Matoi in wide patterns, acting as a waypoint for his fellow Hikeshi to find both him and the fire. As one would expect, to be the bearer of the Matoi was a huge position of respect, but also one of great danger. Not only was the Matoi massive and heavy, but it was the responsibility of the bearer to both find the fire and then risk being burnt while he stood on the building flagging down his comrades. Going back to Promare and Fire Force, both traditional and futuristic Matoi are present, but neither are really used for their traditional purpose. I mean, Gallo definitely has the right idea when he introduces himself to the Burning Rescue Company, explaining not only the relevance of the Matoi, but also the long, extensive history of the Hikeshi, even bringing it to his very first battle. But when it comes to a sci-fi Matoi, it's this odd hybrid of one part weapon and one part mech armor, more of a homage to the Matoi than anything. Then there's Fire Force's use of Matoi. While Episode 11's opening of the firefight shows off the traditional wielding of the Matoi, its use is definitely far from. Benimaru ends up chucking the freaking thing, as his comrades do in tow, creating a controlled area of destruction. Not exactly the traditional use, but more on that in just a second. So that's the obvious Hikeshi tool, but while the in-your-face use of the Matoi made its historical connection pretty self-evident, there was one other tool that I saw, specifically in Promare, that caught my attention. This long hooked pole that made up the primary weapon of Gallo's Sashiko-themed mech. Granted, I'm pretty sure that Edo period firefighters couldn't shoot water, let alone ice, out of it. I mean, they did have Mizuteppo water pump guns, but those barely did anything without a large water source nearby. But then I found it, the Tobiguchi, or kite speak. These things are seen all over Edo period artistic depictions of Hikeshi firefighters and ukiyo-e. But it really is nothing more than a small hook on a really long pole. What purpose does that have? Maybe prying rubble out or something? But oh no! Turns out the Tobiguchi was actually the primary tool that Hikeshi used to put out fires. But before I explain that, I have to warn you all right now that this is getting into spoiler territory for Promare's ending. So if you need it back out now, this is your chance. Good? Okay. So here's the thing about how Hikeshi would put out fires in Edo period Japan. Instead of trying to put it out with water or smothering it, Hikeshi would instead assess the radius of the fire and tear down any buildings that the fire might spread to, eventually forcing the fire to burn out, or at least die down to the point where the Hikeshi's limited water resources could finally douse the flame. So all the Tobiguchi hook sticks that the Hikeshi carried around, those weren't to pry open burning buildings to rescue people and the like. Those were the tools used to smash and dismantle any of the other buildings that would allow the fire to spread. I suppose in a way you could say that Hikeshi were more of a demolition team than traditional firefighting force. But regardless of the losses of people's homes and businesses, the fire was stopped and the people gave thanks to the Hikeshi. Better for a few homes to be torn down than hundreds if not thousands of homes lost to the fire. And this, to me, this is the greatest connection of all between Promare, Fire Force, and the Edo period Hikeshi. Because in both anime, that's exactly how their iterations of destructive fires were put out. For Fire Force, Benimaru and the 7th Company leveled an entire block to stop the infernalized monster they were hunting. And according to the anime, where the Holy Soul Church would offer prayers in their ritual to stop one who was infernalized, the people of Asakusa would offer their homes instead in their own ritual if it were to stop an infernalized human. Houses could be rebuilt, lives could not, which was the exact same principle that Hikeshi used in order to trap and put out a fire. And then you have Promare. Now, I won't sit here and say that this is a storytelling masterpiece, because this is Trigger we're talking about here. But for all the movie's weirdness, its ending made such a huge amount of sense from the perspective of the Hikeshi. In order to save the world from being destroyed from internalized pressure of the burnish, instead of preventing it from blazing, the world had to allow it to burn out in a glorious blast that torched the entire globe. Don't ask me how that's even possible, again, this is a Trigger anime. But letting a fire burn itself out in order to protect the people? That's exactly how the Hikeshi did it.
Huh. Man, you'd think with how big a role Hikeshi played in Edo society and how popular they were with the people, there'd be way more stories about him.
Well, that's what I meant at the beginning of this video. There are dozens of tales of the Hikeshi told in all kinds of old visual mediums, from ukiyo-e to kabuki, so I'm really surprised there are so few anime about them. But I am glad we at least have these. And if you want to check out these modern takes on Hikeshi for yourself, you can actually watch all of Fire Force over on Verve. What, never heard of Verve? Well, it's basically a streaming service that not only houses some of the best anime, old and new, but also everything from classic Nicktoons to some of Cartoon Network's greatest hits, to even independently created series like Cyanide and Happiness and Ruby, available on PC, Xbox, PS4, and mobile devices. But hey, why take my word for it? If you'd like to check it out for yourself, head on over to verve.co/gaijin to get a 30-day free trial of Verve's premium membership. That means early access to the newest shows, no more ads, and the ability to watch tons of content offline. Again, that's vrv.co/GAIJIN. But in any case, thanks for watching, everyone. I'm thinking about experimenting with some more videos just talking about my experiences in Japan and how it's helped me get a better understanding of the amazing culture that I share with all of you here on my videos. People have been having a ton of fun over at my streams listening to my stories, so I figure why not bring some of that over here? So if you don't want to miss out on that, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss out on a new episode. But until next time, everyone, this is Gaijin Goombah, signing out.